At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Aram. Let's begin. The last verse was always the hardest. Linnea's long, hunger-thinned fingers hovered over the vibration tapestry. The living filament weave, a kinetic memory construct, pulsed with a guttering, tired light. The tapestry depicted the day the sky turned gray, the day Althea's shaping vibrations fell to the Orthian swarm's drone. 4 years of hiding in this cavern, breathing air thick with the metallic tang of scrubbers, the damp, earthy scent from fungal hydroponics, and the sharp reek of cold sweat. 4 years preserving the past because the swarm stole the future.
Vibration Shaper?
A small voice whispered from the darkness. The voice belonged to Elian, a child born in the before time who only remembered the silence. Linnea turned to him, her expression softening. The twin sets of membranes on her collarbones and temples, thin as insect wings, trembled.
Yes, little one. Tell us a story. Tell us of the signal.
Linnea took a slow breath, a familiar ache spreading from her sternum. The story was a frayed comfort, a ritual for a hope long dead. Still, she knelt, her hand gentle on the boy's shoulder. The other children, pressed together for shared body heat on the cold stone, turned to face her, their wide, shadowed eyes huge in the gloom. Their skin, like all Alani, was semi-translucent, their inner anatomies faintly visible. A scatter of ghosts in the gloom, each threatened to wink out.
Once,
she began, her voice a low hum that made the stone vibrate.
The elders gathered at the locust progenitor. The swarm descended, and our shaping vibrations couldn't turn back its tide of interlocking chrome and stillness. But we had one last pattern to shape, a cry for help, encoded in a single, desperate frequency.
She described the final beacon, a pair of neuron clusters they'd entangled across space-time, cultured from the locust progenitor itself. Into one, they impressed their final plea, their history, their art, their sorrow, hoping the other, hurled toward a distant star, would emit the same pattern. They aimed it at a star system designated by ancient survey drones, a place rumored to harbor a chaotic, stubborn species.
We sent our voice into the great void,
Linnea concluded, her own voice barely a whisper.
And then we waited. And no one came,
Elian finished, his voice a flat recitation.
No one came,
Linnea affirmed, the words tasting like ash. A rhythmic vibration passed through the stone, from an Orthian reclaimer patrol on the surface far above. The ground trembled. Dust sifted from the cavern ceiling. The children flinched, huddling closer to the tapestry, its faint light a small comfort. The patrol's rumble was the planet's new, monstrous heartbeat. Unshielded power conduits, thick as a human thigh, webbed the ceiling aboard the Martian hegemony super dreadnought Phobos Anomaly, their heat shielding flaking away to dust. The air hummed with their output, and a constant drip of condensation from overtaxed recyclers pattered on the deck plates. The air tasted of charged ions, hot metal, and scorched coffee. At its center, Fleet Commander Kader Hideki stood before the main holotank, a waist-high cylinder projecting a flickering three-dimensional battle space, his fleet's vectors trailing comet tails of light. His face was a roadmap of old scars and hard miles. A pale scar cut through his left eyebrow, a souvenir from a boarding action over Ganymede. The cybernetic eye beneath it, a dull silver, whirred softly as it tracked telemetry.
"Breach is holding, Commander,"
Lieutenant Irina Soldatov said, her voice cutting through the bridge hum.
"The rupture is tearing up local space, but it's within our models. Barely."
Hideki grunted. Limits are for engineers and politicians, Lieutenant. Get me a visual. The battlespace projection shimmered, the simulated void tearing open. It looked less like a portal and more like a physical wound in space, the edges raw and cauterized with physics-defying light. From that wound, the ships came. They poured through the gap, a chaotic flotilla of mismatched vessels defying every principle of unified naval design. A blocky, weapon-bristled assault carrier from the Jovian Combine emerged, its hull plating a patchwork of mismatched alloys. Beside it, a sleek, blade-like corporate cruiser from the Sirius Board of Directors, its commercial logos painted over with crude, gray military insignia. Bulky, over-engineered colonial frigates from the outer belt, more reactor than ship, jostled for position with ancient Martian battle wagons like his own Phobos anomaly. The Coalition Expeditionary Force had arrived.
"All ships through,"
Soldatov said, her left hand keying in a sequence while her right hand directed sensor sweeps with a flick of her wrist.
3 years of threats and blackmail, all present and accounted for.
Good, Hideki said, his voice flat. He watched the last stragglers emerge from the closing breach. He zoomed the holotank's view, his silver eye tracking data as the planet ahead resolved into focus. It was a perfect sphere of metallic gray, its surface a seamless mosaic of interlocking geometric shapes, shifting and reforming in the system's weak light. A tomb. Soldatov's console chirped.
"The signal source. Commander, it wasn't a radio wave. The Alani punched a pinhole through space-time. R&D said time dilation so warped the data that making it look coherent took a year. Took 3 more years to turn that pinhole tech into the breach drives that got us here."
A 4-year-old plea, Hideki murmured. Let's make sure it was worth the wait. Begin system-wide scan. Find their power hubs and command nodes. I want to know where this infection's heart is. A different tremor shook the cavern. A deep, discordant violence instead of a patrol's rhythmic rumble. A hairline crack snaked across the stone ceiling, and a dust shower rained down, extinguishing the hydroponic's weak glow. The children cried out. Ancestral emergency runes carved into the walls flickered to life with a weak, amber light. A young Alani scout, Rian, stumbled into the cavern from a listening tunnel. The membranes on his temples vibrated so intensely they blurred. He gasped, wordless, and stabbed a trembling finger toward the ceiling.
"What is it?"
Linnea demanded, pulling herself to her feet.
"Rian, what did you hear?"
He shook his head, gesturing again, more urgently. He scrambled up a pile of fallen rubble to a fissure near the ceiling, a crack offering a sliver of the sky. He beckoned her to follow. Linnea climbed, a frantic pulse hammering in her throat. She pressed her face to the narrow opening. The surface's cold, metallic air, a shock against her skin. She looked up. The Orthian swarm's gray, manufactured sky was fractured. Thousands of incandescent pinpricks appeared from nowhere, searing away the seamless gray layers. Unlike the swarm's silent, fluid constructs, these new shapes were raw and asymmetrical, bristling with obvious weapons. Their ragged formations insulted the swarm's perfect orbits. An old elder, Lyran, followed her up the rubble. His frame, already frail, seemed to shrink. He stared at the unbelievable sight, the membranes on his collarbones trembling.
"A signal,"
he whispered, the sound a dry rustle of disbelief.
"They came."
Linnea stared, unable to process the firestorm in the heavens. Hope was a forgotten luxury. A new kind of terror seized her, one loud and alive. Infinitely better than the silence.
"Commander, multiple Orthian constructs rising from the surface to intercept. Orbital platforms are powering weapons,"
Soldatov reported. Hideki read the fragmented data from the Alani signal. He knew what he faced. All ships. Hideki's voice cut through the bridge chatter. Engage at will. Target their orbital platforms first. Break their sky dominance before my coffee gets cold. The Coalition Expeditionary Force responded with a bar brawl's chaotic, overwhelming fury. From the Phobos anomaly's spine, a magnetic accelerator hurled a tungsten rod the size of a skyscraper at a quarter light speed. The kinetic impact was silent in the void, but a flash outshone the local stars as the orbital platform vaporized. Plasma cannons from the Jovian ships spat bolts of contained stellar fire. Corporate cruisers unleashed swarms of self-guided missiles, painting the sky with exhaust trails. The Orthian ships, seamless constructs of flowing metal moving with unnerving fluidity, maneuvered to surround and absorb the human vessels. The human fleet ignored them, blasting straight through their formations with raw kinetic force and plasma fire. The swarm, operating on geological timescales, couldn't adapt to an enemy measuring victory in seconds. Down in the cavern, Linnea, Lyran, and the children watched the sky burn. New constellations of fire bloomed and died in an instant. The humans' weapons' relentless, deep-throated percussion vibrated through the planet's rock. The swarm's seamless hulls shattered, broke, and fell, consumed by explosions lighting up the fissure like lightning. Lyran sagged against the rock wall and slid to the ground, his gaze still fixed on the fiery heavens. "We believed no one received our message," he murmured, the words catching in his throat. Beside Linnea, young Elian stared at the firestorm, his face illuminated by the distant detonations. His voice trembled with something Linnea hadn't heard in years. Not just fear, but a fierce awe.
"Rescue,"
he whispered. Linnea watched a city-sized torpedo, a breaker, as she would later learn, arc across the sky and plunge into a major Orthian nexus on the continent opposite. The resulting explosion grew so vast it bloomed as a visible flare on the planet's curve. Help arrived, loud, ugly, and looking very much like the sky's unmaking. A brutal metal box of a human dropship landed with a ground-shaking thud, sending tremors through the cavern. Its ramp slammed down, and soldiers poured out. They wore bulky, scarred environmental suits, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They moved in interlocking fire teams, sweeping the cavern in overlapping arcs with weapons held low. They didn't speak the Alani language, only pointing and gesturing. As the soldiers spread deeper into the tunnels, Linnea felt a light touch on her arm. Lyran stood beside her, eyes reflecting the soldiers' visor lights. "Go," he murmured. Then he squeezed her hand and turned back into the tunnels with 3 runners, vanishing into the dark. Aboard the Phobos anomaly, the hangar bay was a cavern of steel and noise, filled with machinery clang, crew shouts, and hydraulic hiss. A chemical soup of air stung Linnea's sensitive auditory membranes. Guards herded her and the other 23 Alani survivors through decontamination fields that bathed them in pulsing actinic light, then gave them drab, gray jumpsuits that felt rough against their skin. Guards separated Linnea from the others. 2 armed guards escorted her through identical, labyrinthine steel corridors to a small, windowless room. A single metal table and 2 chairs stood bolted to the floor. A man in a crisp, dark blue uniform, an intelligence officer, sat waiting. He questioned her for hours, asking not about her people's suffering, but about swarm command structures, energy distribution, and troop movements. Linnea answered as best she could, framing her knowledge in her people's biological and vibrational terms, speaking of nexuses as ganglia and communication pathways as sympathetic vibrations. The officer listened, his expression impassive, his fingers tapping away at a datapad. At one point, he stopped. He reread a section from his notes, looked up at Linnea, then back at his pad. Without a word, he stood and made a low-voiced call on his wristcom. When he returned, his eyes narrowed slightly as he reassessed Linnea. "Come with me," he said. The guards fell in behind them. They took her to a secure tactical briefing room adjacent to the main bridge. A massive holotank dominated the room, projecting a churning hologram of her world, Althea, now scarred with angry red threat icons and arcing kinetic strike vectors. At the tank's edge stood a man whose stillness commanded the room. His expression was weary, but his jaw was set. A dull, mechanical silver eye stared from his face. He didn't turn as they approached. "Commander Hideki," the intelligence officer said. "This is the Ilani survivor, Linnea. Her testimony correlates with our long-range energy scans, specifically regarding what she calls the silent chorus of Lathos." Commander Kader Hideki finally turned his head. He looked her over, cataloging her as a threat or a tool. "Report," Linnea explained. She spoke of the Lathos region, a place that was once a grand conservatory where her people cultivated bioforms whose vibrations were so complex they could sculpt stone. These forms, she explained, were their oldest patterns' living libraries. Hideki held up a hand, cutting her off, his gesture sharp and impatient. "Spiritual significance doesn't show up on my display, Vibration Shaper. Your title, is that correct?" Linnea nodded, the membranes at her temples tightening. "Good," he said, turning back to the holotank. He pointed at a glowing red icon representing a major swarm energy confluence. "Is that nexus culturally significant?"
"It was once the grand spires of—"
"I don't care what it was," he snapped. "I care what it is. Is it tactically critical? Does destroying it hurt the enemy? Yes or no?"
"Yes,"
she whispered.
"It is tactically critical."
"Thank you," Hideki said, turning away from her. He spoke into his wristcom. "Zoldatov, retask Breaker Gamma to target designation Lathos Prime. Full yield." Hideki gestured for Linnea to step closer to the holotank. "Watch." The holographic map zoomed in on the continent of Lathos. A red vector, the breaker torpedo, plunged toward the planet's surface. Linnea flinched as it made impact. On the map, a bloom of incandescent light erased 1,000 square kilometers of her world. Hideki called it crustal sterilization. The term was as cold and clean as the act was violent. She felt the detonation's deep, seismic shock through the ship's deck plates. She watched strike after strike, each a physical blow. The weeping gardens, the resonant canyons, the spire of whispers, all gone, erased from existence by a man who saw her entire civilization as a series of coordinates on a map. The air left her lungs, and she gripped the holotank's edge to keep from falling. Yet, as she stared at the swirling energy patterns, her training took over. An instinct honed over a lifetime shaping vibrations rebelled against the sight. A discrepancy. "Wait," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. She pointed at the display. "There, look at the energy patterns." He leaned closer, his cybernetic eye adjusting its focus on the indicated area. "I see standard swarm energy distribution, a dispersed grid." "No," Linnea insisted. "The flow is wrong. They're diverting power away from this region." She tapped a small, geographically unremarkable valley nestled between two mountain ranges. The humans' powerful sensors tagged it as low priority, an inert landscape. "They are actively starving it of energy. Why?" Soldatov's voice came over a speaker. "Minimal energy readings, Commander. No significant structures. Organic substrate is unusual, but not hostile." "That was the Valley of Dissonant Vibrations," Linnea explained, her mind racing. "A place where we grew disruptive things. Bioforms producing chaotic, disruptive vibration patterns. We used them in avant-garde weavings. The swarm's network relies on order, on a single unified data frequency. This place broadcasts only noise." Hideki was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the topographical map. A vein pulsed at his temple. "Scout Team Delta," he said, his voice clipped, speaking into his wristcom. "I have new coordinates for your reconnaissance mission. Priority Alpha." He turned away from the holotank without another word to her, already focused on the next tactical problem. Linnea watched him go, a tremor running through her. He ordered the destruction of her history, but he just listened to her. The thought was both horrifying and strangely steadying. The warlord's table formed a gallery of holograms projected onto the Phobos Anomaly's briefing room deck. One commander paced within his holographic projector, another's image flickered as he slammed a fist on his console. "My board of directors is asking for a preliminary report on salvageable Orthian technology, Hideki," said Administrator Vale of the Sirius corporate conglomerate. Her image was sharp, her uniform immaculate. "Our primary investment in this venture was predicated on a significant technological return." "Your primary investment?" Hideki retorted, not bothering to look up from a datapad. "Was avoiding assimilation. Tell your board to be patient." From the other side of the table, Warlord Varco, a barrel-chested man whose colonial fleet was little more than a band of well-armed pirates, slammed a meaty fist on his holographic console. "Patient? We're burning through munitions like a torch ship in Atmo. I've got 3 breaker torpedoes left in my main magazine, and this integration with your hegemony targeting systems is a nightmare. My gunnery crews are threatening mutiny." "Your crews threaten mutiny if the coffee is cold, Varco," Hideki said. "The integration protocols work. If your technicians can't handle them, I can lend you one of mine. They're 12. Vale spoke of resource allocation, Varco of battle pay, a third commander from the Jovian Combine of perceived slights to his fleet's honor. Hideki let them vent for precisely 60 seconds. Then he placed his palms flat on the table. The quiet thud silenced the room. He finally looked up, sweeping his gaze across the assembled commanders. "We are all here because the alternative is extinction," he stated. "The Orthian swarm only consumes. It assimilates. It leaves no survivors for you to bill, Vale. It leaves no wreckage for you to salvage, Varco." He paused, letting his words settle. The Coalition Expeditionary Pact we all signed includes clauses for insubordination. It has penalties for breaking formation. It has termination clauses for any commander who jeopardizes this mission for personal gain. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on Varco. And unlike your targeting systems, Warlord, rest assured the demolition charges wired to every ship in this fleet work perfectly. Varco grumbled, sinking back into his chair. Vale gave a prim, tight-lipped nod. Hideki cut the connection, and the holograms vanished, leaving him alone in the quiet room. The report from Scout Team Delta came in 3 hours later. The report confirmed everything Linnea predicted and more. A massive subterranean network of dissonant bioforms filled the valley. Ancient progenitor-class organisms. The Orthian swarm couldn't get near them. Drone footage showed the silver nanite swarms recoiling from the valley's edge as if from a physical barrier. The vibrational output was so chaotic, so disruptive, it caused the swarm's nanites to lose cohesion. When Hideki summoned Linnea back to the briefing room, an engineering chief and a logistics officer waited with him. They turned to her expectantly. She stood beside Hideki at the holotank, which now displayed a detailed vibration map of the valley. The holotank showed a visual representation of a chaotic energy field, a riot of conflicting frequencies, making her own membranes ache just looking at it.
The swarm is a single frequency,
she explained.
Every part of it, from the smallest nanite to the largest construct, vibrates in perfect sync. That's how they maintain cohesion over planetary distances. But these progenitor forms, they broadcast chaos. They introduce a fundamental error into the swarm's network.
An error we can exploit, Hideki finished. Can you isolate the primary disruptive frequency?
Isolate it?
Linnea gave a dry, breathy laugh.
Commander, that's like trying to capture one specific note from a rock slide. The point isn't one frequency, but the disharmony of all of them. But...
She paused, an idea forming.
We don't need to replicate it. We just need to amplify it.
She explained that if they could broadcast the valley's chaotic vibrational signature across the planet, they could create pockets where the swarm's constructs would literally fall apart. Dead zones, areas of cover for ground troops to advance, to strike at key nodes without facing the full, unified strength of the Orthian swarm. A key, a weapon forged from biology instead of ballistics. Hideki listened, then turned to Soldatov over the comm. Give me the chief of engineering. Tell him to fabricate a wide-band bioacoustic amplifier. He turned back to Linnea. He spoke to the engineer with the same flat, direct finality he used to order an orbital strike. Whatever the vibration shaper needs, give it to her. He was aiming her at the enemy. The Phobos Anomaly's engineering bay was a cathedral of heavy machinery and smelled of grease and superheated plasma. Hulking mechanics in stained coveralls worked on the massive railgun slug components and torpedo guidance systems. In this chaos's center, Linnea created a small, quiet island of focus. On a workbench, a small, cultivated sample of the dissonant bioforms sat in a nutrient bath. It resembled a knot of dense, fibrous tissue, like petrified wood, and it pulsed with a faint, erratic light. She was teaching them. A handful of the ship's top engineers, their faces smudged with grease, stood around her. They watched, one scratching his head, another leaning in so close she nearly touched the containment field.
You can't force it,
Linnea explained, her voice low and steady against the shriek of a nearby plasma cutter. She ran her fingers through the air just above the bioform, her own membranes fluttering as she generated a low, sympathetic hum.
You must feel its pattern. Your goal is to harmonize with its chaos, not control it.
In response to her hum, the fibrous knot emitted a low, grating vibration. A shimmery, momentary distortion. A knot of raw kinetic force formed in the air above it. One of the engineers, a woman with a thick belter accent, let out a low whistle.
So you're saying we have to ask the magic lump nicely to make the sound we want?
She asked.
It isn't a lump,
Linnea said patiently.
It's a living thing, and it isn't magic, it's sympathetic vibration. You're used to imposing your will on the universe with heat and force. This requires a conversation.
From the doorway's shadows, Hideki watched, unseen. He came to check on the amplifier's progress, but stopped. The tactical overlays projected onto his optical implant flickered as he refocused. For a moment, he wasn't tracking casualty projections or resource expenditures. He watched his engineers, hard, pragmatic people, lean in to listen to the alien artist. Tension left their shoulders as they followed her instructions. The woman with the belter accent even smiled as a shimmering distortion bloomed in the air. He turned and walked away before anyone noticed him, the bioform's quiet hum a strange counterpoint to the war's thunder.
Commander!
Soldatov's voice cut across the bridge comms.
Scout Team Delta is offline. We've lost their signal.
The bridge crew froze at their stations. Only the low life support thrum remained. Hideki clenched his jaw. Moments later, the Orthian swarm adapted. It encountered a chaotic, unpredictable variable and responded with swift mercilessness. It executed the remaining Alani survivor pockets. The broadcasts came on all channels, overriding the fleet's communications. The images were stark, relayed from the assimilating nanites' perspective. The images showed silver clouds swarming small groups of Alani. No sound accompanied the silent, inexorable conversion of living flesh into interlocking, metallic fractals. Then came the voice. A chilling chorus spoke. A multitude of minds speaking as one, using Elder Lyran's synthesized vocal patterns. The swarm took him, and now it wore his voice like a mask.
The chaotic variable has been analyzed.
The voice echoed across the Phobos Anomaly's bridge.
Your aggression is inefficient, a symptom of entropic decay inherent in singular consciousness. It has forced an acceleration of the unification process.
The broadcast shifted, showing a live feed from the planet's core. Linnea saw the locust progenitor, her people's planet-sized living archive, now webbed with shimmering silver conduits. A new structure pulsed at its heart, a nexus of energy, the confluence.
The final integration is at hand,
the voice continued.
The remaining dissonant elements will be harmonized.
The voice then addressed Linnea directly, violating her memory of the old elder.
Your efforts are noted, Vibration Shaper Linnea of Althea. They are a fascinating, final artistic flourish before the silence.
The transmission cut out. No one on the bridge moved. The swarm learned their strategy, and it turned the war into a race against time. The comms channel exploded. Vale's hologram reappeared, demanding,
"We must secure the surface artifacts now!"
Varko's voice boomed over hers. "It's a trap, Hideki! I'm pulling my ships back!" Hideki stood before the holotank, his back to the comms chaos. he could proceed with the original plan, a slow deployment of the disruptors. The safe play, but it would be too slow. Or he could authorize a high-risk, full-frontal assault. Linnea entered the bridge, her stride purposeful. She had earned her place here. She walked straight to him.
"Commander,"
she said, her voice steady.
"we have a third option.
Hideki turned to her.
The confluence at the core.
She said, pointing to the image on the hollow tank.
The core is at its heart. Destroy it, and you'll decapitate the swarm on this world."
"It's at the planet's core," Soldatov interjected.
"Behind impenetrable layers of Orthian matter. We can't get a breaker through that." "You would not go through,"
Linnea corrected.
"You would go under."
She brought up a deep-level geological scan overlaid with a web of massive, hollow tunnels coiling through the planet's mantle.
"The growth conduits,"
she breathed.
"The planet's original vascular system. Millennia-old layers of bioconductive materials shield them. The swarm sensors, they can't see into them. They're vibrationally blind."
She traced a path with her finger, a twisting route leading from a surface fissure directly to the locus progenitor.
"I can guide you. I can read the deep geothermal vibrations. I can find the way."
Hideki stared at the map. A thin smile touched his mouth's corner. "To mask the insertion," he murmured, his gaze distant. "We need a diversion. A massive one." He looked at the fleet disposition. "Get me Warlord Varko," he said to Soldatov. "Tell him I have a mission worthy of his fleet's particular talents." He turned to his Marine commander. "And get my armor ready." The assault lander, the Fist of Mars, bucked and shuddered as it plunged through Althea's upper atmosphere. Inside, the re-entry shriek and stressed metal's groan struck like a physical blow. Hideki, strapped into the commander's seat, watched the tactical display. The main fleet, led by Varko's colonial battle wagons, engaged the Orthian armada in high orbit. Red icons vanished from the display in blossoms of light. Varko put on a hell of a show, a glorious, suicidal charge, fixing the swarm's attention. Linnea sat beside him, her eyes closed, her hands resting on a specialized console that fed her the planet's deep geothermal vibrations. She was their guide. Her membranes fluttered with concentration, flushed to deep violet.
"The entrance is ahead,"
she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos.
"A canyon fissure, 3 kilometers deep."
The lander's pilot, a grim-faced woman named Keel, guided the craft into the massive crack in the planet's metallic shell. They plunged into darkness. The ship's lights flared, illuminating an ancient growth conduit's twisting walls. The rock was slick with organic tissue, carved with spiraling patterns. They flew through a dead world's veins.
"I'm picking up followers!"
Keel yelled.
"New contacts, fast movers. They look different."
On the rear display, Hideki saw them. The swarm adapted again. Smaller, faster, and shaped like metallic predators, they were specifically designed to hunt in these narrow tunnels. "Evasive maneuvers," Hideki ordered. "Linnea, how much further?"
"The currents are strong here,"
she said, her brow furrowed.
"The path is unstable. Left fork ahead, now!"
Keel threw the lander into a hard bank, scraping the ship's wing against the conduit wall with a screech of tortured metal. A volley of plasma fire from the pursuing construct seared the rock where they were a second before. They burst out of the narrow conduit into a cavern so vast it felt like open space. They reached the planet's core. Before them floated the locus progenitor, a continent-sized root system, its tissues glowing with internal light from its own energy transfer, now marred by the Orthian swarm's cold silver web. At its center, suspended in a cage of shimmering energy, hung the Confluence Mind's avatar, Elder Lyran himself, a flowing shell of metallic silver encasing his body. His open eyes glowed with the swarm's cold light. "The chaotic variable arrives," the avatar spoke, its voice the chorus of a billion minds using Lyran's stolen timber. It looked at Linnea. "Vibration Shaper, you have brought the agents of discord to this sacred place. Join us. We will make your pattern eternal. Perfected."
You don't perfect a pattern by forcing every component to move in lockstep,
Linnea shot back. The avatar's gaze shifted to Hideki, who unstrapped himself, plasma rifle in hand. "Commander Kader Hideki, your individuality is a flaw, a disease. We offer the cure. Unity." Hideki leveled his rifle. "We like the chaos," he said. "Marines, form a perimeter. Buy her time." His 10 Marine personal guard disembarked, forming a defensive circle around the lander and the amplifier device. From the cavern walls, Orthian constructs emerged, hunter-killers joined by larger warrior forms. The final battle began. Plasma bolts seared the air. Hideki moved with economical purpose. His rifle came up, fired a 3-round burst that cored through a construct's optical sensor and dropped to a new target. He saw a microsecond energy spike build in a warrior form's cannon. "Genji, down!" he yelled, and the Marine beside him dropped just as a blast of energy vaporized the rock over his head. Meanwhile, Linnea worked at the amplifier. She placed her hands on its central panel, closing her eyes. She drew on 4 years of grief, rage, and loss, and unleashed a discordant vibration from her own body, a frequency so wrong it felt like it could tear the air apart. The amplifier caught her cry, magnified it 1,000 times, and blasted it at the confluence. The silver webbing around the locust progenitor flickered. Lyran's avatar convulsed, its choral voice breaking into a screech of static. It was working. Too slow. For every wave of constructs Hideki's Marines cut down, 2 more emerged. Their perimeter shrank. 1 Marine went down, his armor breached. Then another. They needed more time. "Soldatov, are you reading me?" Hideki said into his private comm channel, firing another burst into an advancing construct.
"Commander, your signal is weak, but I read you."
The Phobos Anomaly's new acting captain replied, her voice tense. "The asset is secure and is close to completing the objective," Hideki stated. He glanced at Linnea, the asset. "But the enemy is about to overrun our position. I'm enacting contingency K8. Scuttle the Fist of Mars."
Contingency K8? Commander, that will collapse the drive core. We can't contain the rupture.
"It's not a request, Lieutenant," Hideki said. He turned to the remaining Marines. "Fall back! Get the vibration shaper on the emergency shuttle! Now! That's an order!" His Marines hesitated. "Go!" he roared. They obeyed, grabbing Linnea, who nearly collapsed, and dragging her toward the small escape shuttle docked at the lander's rear. Hideki provided covering fire, walking backward toward the lander's cockpit. He tossed a fresh energy packet to his sergeant. "See you on the other side, Sergeant." He sealed the cockpit door. Through the viewport, he watched his last soldiers get Linnea into the shuttle and blast away. He watched the horde swarm the now undefended lander. He keyed the overload sequence for the breach drive core. A 5-second timer appeared on the console. His last words were to his XO, calm and clear. "Objective complete." The universe tore itself open inside Althea's heart. Aboard the escaping shuttle, the blast threw Linnea against the bulkhead as a flash of silent light erupted behind them. The shockwave hit a moment later, a physical blow, sending the small craft tumbling through the conduit. On the human flagship's bridge, the crew stared at the main holotank. For a moment, Althea's entire map turned white with energy readings. Then, it cleared. The Confluence mind was gone. A catastrophic feedback loop of raw, chaotic noise screamed through the swarm network. On the planet's surface, the constructs shuddered and collapsed into shimmering gray sand. In orbit, the ships engaged with Varco's fleet froze. A wave of dissolution washed over them, their fluid metallic forms shattering into clouds of inert dust. The network broke. The frequency went dead. And then, nothing. The constant, low-level hum that permeated their world for 4 years was gone. On the human bridge, the crew stood motionless, their faces grim. The Alani were free, but their world was a shattered grave, and their saviors paid for that freedom in blood and iron. Months later, a temporary habitat orbited the slowly healing Althea. Below, the first genetically engineered flora shoots broke through the gray dust. A new beginning. In a sunlit dome, Linnea stood before a new generation of Alani children. She taught them to weave, but not with the old, placid creations patterns. She taught them a new pattern. A pattern of iron and fire, of dissonance and thunder. A pattern of terrible, wonderful, loud friends who came when no one else would. A pattern of sacrifice. A complex, challenging piece full of jarring rhythms and brutal crescendos. But the children listened, their membranes fluttering as they learned to shape this new, strange vibration. Beside them rested her masterpiece, a vibration tapestry unlike any seen before. Its pattern depicted a human warship, blocky, ugly, and scarred. The Phobos anomaly. Its brutal form intertwined with a living Alani bioform, creating a new shape. Below the image, she inscribed its name in the living weave, and its commander's name. From the habitat's main viewport, she watched as the Coalition Expeditionary Force prepared to depart. The fleet was a shadow of what arrived. Hulls were scarred and patched, entire sections of sunships simply gone. But they were victorious. They formed up, turned their ugly, beautiful ships toward a point in space, and one by one tore fresh, bleeding wounds in reality and vanished through them. They headed back to their own chaotic corner of the universe, their job done. They left behind silence and a people who would forever remember that salvation arrived as a roar, overwhelming the silence.